On the afternoon of May 26, 1828, a teenage boy stumbled into Unschlittplatz, the main square of Nuremberg, Bavaria. He could barely walk. His legs moved in awkward, shuffling steps, as if he had never learned to use them properly. His feet were swollen and bleeding inside ill-fitting boots. He wore clothes that were too large for his thin frame, a dark coat and trousers that hung on him like borrowed garments. In his trembling hand, he clutched 2 letters. The people of Nuremberg watched him with suspicion and curiosity. Who was this strange young man who could barely speak? Who flinched at sunlight as if it burned his eyes? Who seemed terrified of everything around him? He approached a shoemaker named Georg Weichmann and tried to form words, but all that came out was a single phrase, repeated over and over like a prayer or a curse. "I want to be a cavalryman, as my father was." This was how the world met Kaspar Hauser, a boy who would become one of the most haunting mysteries of the 19th century. A boy who claimed he had spent his entire life locked in darkness. A boy whose very existence would shake the foundations of European aristocracy, spark international intrigue, and end in murder. This is his story. When Georg Weichmann led the boy to the authorities, no one knew what to make of him. The letters he carried only deepened the mystery. The first letter, addressed to the captain of the 4th Squadron of the 6th Cavalry Regiment in Nuremberg, was written in crude handwriting. It claimed the boy had been left at the writer's house as an infant on October 7, 1812, and that the writer was a poor laborer who could barely afford to keep him. The letter stated that the boy had never been allowed outside, and that the writer wished for him to become a cavalryman like his father. The writer's identity was not given. The second letter, supposedly from the boy's mother, was dated 1812 and claimed his father was a cavalryman of the 6th Regiment who had died. It gave his birth date as April 30th, 1812, and his name as Kaspar. But the handwriting of both letters was identical. Someone had forged them. But why? And more importantly, who? The authorities took Kaspar to the local police station where they attempted to question him. What they discovered was both fascinating and disturbing. The boy could barely speak German. He knew perhaps 50 words, most of them simple nouns. He could write his name, Kaspar Hauser, but nothing else. When shown objects, he reacted with childlike wonder or absolute terror. A candle flame mesmerized him. A mirror caused him to reach behind it, searching for the person he saw in the reflection. He had no concept of distance or perspective. When looking out a window at the city below, he tried to reach out and touch the buildings, unable to understand they were far away. But the most disturbing discoveries were physical. Doctors examined him and found his legs were weak and underdeveloped, the muscles atrophied from disuse. His skin was pale, almost translucent, like someone who had never seen sunlight. His eyes were extremely sensitive to light, causing him to squint and turn away even from dim candlelight. His knees bore calluses consistent with crawling or kneeling for extended periods. The doctors concluded that his physical condition was consistent with prolonged confinement in a small, dark space. The authorities initially assumed he was a vagrant or a fraud, perhaps part of some elaborate scheme. They placed him in the tower of the city's Westner Gate, in a cell normally used for criminals and vagrants. But there, something unexpected happened. The jailer, Andreas Hiltel, and his family took pity on the strange boy. They watched as Kaspar sat for hours in the same position, staring at nothing. They saw how he recoiled from meat and would only eat bread and water. They noticed how he would play with small toys for hours, arranging and rearranging wooden horses with the concentration of a small child. Slowly, carefully, Kaspar began to communicate. Through simple words and gestures, through drawings and demonstrations, he told a story so bizarre that many refused to believe it. Yet the physical evidence made it impossible to dismiss entirely. According to Kaspar, he had spent his entire conscious life in a small, dark room, perhaps 6 feet long and 4 feet wide, with a ceiling so low he could not stand upright. He had never seen the person who kept him there. He would wake to find bread and water beside him. Sometimes the water tasted strange, and after drinking it, he would fall into a deep sleep. When he woke, He would find his hair and nails had been cut, and his straw bedding changed. He had 2 wooden horses as his only possessions, his only companions in the darkness. He had no memory of ever seeing daylight before the day of his release. No memory of other human faces, of voices speaking to him, of his own childhood. His existence had been reduced to that cell, that darkness, those wooden horses. Time had no meaning. Days and nights were indistinguishable. He had no education, no socialization, no concept of the world beyond his prison. Then one day, a man came. This was the first time Kaspar had ever seen another human being that he could remember. The man taught him to write his name. He taught him the phrase about wanting to be a cavalryman. He held Kaspar's feet in his lap and beat them, forcing the boy to stand and walk despite the excruciating pain. Then, after perhaps a few weeks of this brutal training, the man brought him to Nuremberg and abandoned him in the square. This was Kaspar Hauser's story. This was the nightmare he claimed as his past. News of the mysterious boy spread rapidly through Nuremberg and beyond. The city was captivated. Who could have done such a thing? What possible motive could someone have for imprisoning a child in such conditions for 16 years? The questions multiplied with each passing day. Professor Georg Friedrich Daumer, a philosopher and school teacher, took a particular interest in Kaspar's case. Daumer was a man of the Enlightenment, someone who believed in the power of education and the fundamental goodness of human nature. He saw in Kaspar an opportunity to test the theories of the day about human development. What happened when a human being was raised in complete isolation? How much of our humanity is learned and how much is innate? In July of 1828, just 2 months after his appearance, Daumer took Kaspar into his home. What followed was an extraordinary experiment in rehabilitation and education. Daumer kept meticulous notes on Kaspar's progress, and what he documented was remarkable. Kaspar proved to be an exceptional student. Despite his lack of prior education, he learned to read fluently within months. His handwriting, initially crude and childlike, became refined and elegant. He learned mathematics, geography, Latin, and drawing. But more fascinating to Daumer were Kaspar's perceptions and descriptions of the world. Kaspar possessed what Daumer called an animal sensitivity. His senses, particularly his sense of smell, were extraordinarily acute. He could detect the presence of metal from across a room. He could identify different types of paper by smell alone. He claimed to see colors in magnetic fields. Whether these abilities were genuine or exaggerated, they suggested a person whose sensory development had taken an unusual path, someone who had learned to perceive the world in ways most people never develop. But there were also troubling signs. Kaspar had nightmares, terrible dreams where he screamed and thrashed. He was terrified of being alone in the dark. He developed inexplicable fears, phobias that seemed to have no source in his new experiences. And he told stories about his captivity that sometimes varied in details, leading skeptics to question whether any of it was true. The mystery of Kaspar's identity became the subject of intense speculation throughout Europe. Who was he really? Why had he been imprisoned? One theory emerged that would dominate discussions for years to come. Kaspar Hauser was of noble birth, possibly even a prince, and had been imprisoned to prevent him from claiming his rightful inheritance. The theory centered on the Grand Duchy of Baden. In 1812, the same year Kaspar claimed to have been born, Crown Prince Karl of Baden married Stephanie de Beauharnais, the adopted daughter of Napoleon Bonaparte. Their first son was born in September of 1812, but died mysteriously after just 2 weeks. Some whispered that the baby had not died at all, but had been kidnapped and replaced with a dying infant. The motive? Prince Karl's younger brother Leopold would inherit the throne if Karl had no surviving male heirs. If Leopold or his supporters had arranged to remove the infant, they would clear the path to power. Could Kaspar Hauser be that missing prince? The timing was right. His age matched. His refined features and bearing, which became more apparent as he learned civilized behavior, suggested noble breeding. And the lengths someone had gone to hide him, to erase his identity and his past, suggested this was no ordinary crime. This was political intrigue at the highest level. But there were problems with this theory. Kaspar himself had no memories of his true identity. He could not confirm or deny any connection to the Baden royal family, and the Baden court vehemently denied any connection, dismissing the entire theory as scandalous nonsense. Without proof, it remained speculation, tantalizing but unverifiable. Daumer's household was comfortable for Kaspar, a place of learning and relative peace. But on October 17, 1829, that peace was shattered. Kaspar was in the house's privy, the outdoor toilet, when someone attacked him. He stumbled back into the house, blood streaming from a wound on his forehead. He claimed a man in a black mask had struck him with a sharp implement, possibly a blade. The police investigation found drops of blood leading to the privy and a blood-stained blade nearby. But there were inconsistencies. The wound, while bloody, was relatively superficial. Some items in the privy had been disturbed in ways that suggested Kaspar had been there for some time before the attack. And crucially, Kaspar's story about the attack changed slightly when he retold it. Some investigators began to suspect that Kaspar had wounded himself to gain attention or sympathy. This was a turning point in public perception. Before the attack, most of Nuremberg had viewed Kaspar with sympathy as a victim of a terrible crime. After the attack, doubt crept in. Was Kaspar Hauser a genuine victim, or was he a clever fraud who had deceived the entire city? Was his story of lifelong imprisonment true, or had he constructed an elaborate lie to gain favor and support? Daumer, shaken by the attack and the controversy surrounding it, could no longer care for Kaspar. The boy was moved to the home of Baron von Tucher, a Nuremberg magistrate who approached the case with legal precision and growing skepticism. Von Tucher investigated Kaspar's background more thoroughly than anyone had before. He traveled to neighboring regions, searching for any evidence of where Kaspar might have been imprisoned, any witnesses who might have seen him before his appearance in Nuremberg. Von Tucher found nothing. No abandoned buildings with evidence of long-term occupation. No reports of a boy matching Kaspar's description. No witnesses to his imprisonment or transport to Nuremberg. The complete absence of evidence disturbed von Tucher deeply. He began to believe that Kaspar's story might be a fabrication, that the boy might be a fraud of extraordinary skill and daring. Living with von Tucher was difficult for Kaspar. The Baron treated him with cold formality, watching him constantly for signs of deception. Kaspar became withdrawn and depressed. He had gone from being the center of sympathetic attention to being an object of suspicion. The psychological toll was evident. His studies suffered, his health declined. He wrote in his diary about feeling trapped, about wishing for death. In December of 1831, Kaspar was moved again, this time to the care of Lord Stanhope, a wealthy English nobleman who had become fascinated by the case. Stanhope believed Kaspar's story and was determined to prove his noble origins. He took Kaspar to Hungary, believing that exposure to different environments and peoples might trigger memories. He hired investigators to look into the Baden connection. He spent a small fortune pursuing the mystery. But after 2 years, even Stanhope's faith wavered. Kaspar remained unable to provide any concrete evidence of his past. The investigations turned up nothing solid. Worse, Kaspar's behavior became increasingly erratic. He told stories that contradicted earlier statements. He seemed to create new memories that fit whatever theory was currently popular. Stanhope reluctantly concluded that Kaspar was either delusional or a fraud. In 1833, he withdrew his support and returned to England, leaving Kaspar in Ansbach, a small town near Nuremberg, in the care of a schoolmaster named Johann Meyer. Meyer was a stern, unforgiving man who treated Kaspar as a burden and a fraud. Kaspar was given menial work as a copying clerk. The grand dreams of noble birth and royal restoration were gone. Instead, Kaspar faced a future of poverty and obscurity, living under the watchful eye of a man who despised him. By December of 1833, Kaspar Hauser was 21 years old. He had spent 5.5 years in the outside world, years of education and controversy, sympathy and suspicion. He was no longer the helpless boy who had stumbled into Nuremberg unable to speak or walk properly. He could read, write, and function in society. But he was profoundly unhappy, trapped in Ansbach, living with a man who treated him with contempt, his story disbelieved by most of the people who had once championed him. On December 14, 1833, Kaspar told Meyer he had received a note asking him to come to the Hofgarten, Ansbach's public garden, to meet someone who had information about his past. Meyer was suspicious but allowed him to go. It was mid-afternoon, cold and gray, with snow covering the ground. Kaspar left the house and walked toward the garden. About 30 minutes later, Kaspar stumbled back to Meyer's house, his steps unsteady, his face pale. He collapsed in the hallway, and when Meyer reached him, he saw blood seeping through Kaspar's coat. Kaspar had been stabbed in the left side of his chest, a deep wound that had pierced his lung and was bleeding internally. Kaspar told Meyer that a stranger had approached him in the Hofgarten and offered to reveal information about his origins. The man had led him to a secluded spot, then suddenly pulled out a knife and stabbed him. Kaspar had struggled back to the house, following his own bloody trail through the snow. He gave Meyer a small purse that he claimed the attacker had given him before the stabbing. Inside the purse was a note, written in mirror writing, that read, "Hauser will be able to tell you quite precisely how I look and from where I am. To save Hauser the effort, I want to tell you myself from where I come. I come from the Bavarian border, on the river. My name is MLO." The note was cryptic, offering just enough information to be tantalizing but not enough to be useful. Who was MLO? What Bavarian border? What river? The note raised more questions than it answered. Kaspar's wound was serious. Doctors were called immediately. They examined the wound and determined it had pierced his lung but had not struck any major blood vessels. With proper care, there was hope he might survive. For 3 days, Kaspar lingered between life and death. He repeated his story about the attack, about the mysterious stranger who had stabbed him. But as the hours passed, his story became less coherent. Fever and pain clouded his mind. On December 17, 1833, 3 days after the attack, Kaspar Hauser died. His last words were reported to be, "I didn't do it myself." Whether he meant he didn't stab himself or something else entirely, no one could say with certainty. The autopsy that followed only deepened the mystery. The examining physicians noted that the angle of the wound was peculiar. The knife had entered from the left side, moving upward and slightly inward. For someone right-handed to inflict such a wound on another person standing face to face would be awkward, but possible. But the angle was also consistent with someone stabbing themselves in a deliberate act of self-harm or suicide. The investigation into Kaspar's death was thorough, but inconclusive. Police followed Kaspar's bloody trail through the snow backwards to the spot in the Hofgarten where the attack supposedly occurred. There they found disturbed snow, drops of blood, and the knife lying on the ground. But there were problems. There was only one set of footprints in the snow, Kaspar's own. No evidence of a second person, no signs of a struggle. And the knife itself was suspicious. It was a simple blade, unremarkable except for one detail. There were no fingerprints on it except Kaspar's own. The official investigation concluded that Kaspar Hauser had stabbed himself. The reasons for such an act were debated. Perhaps it was a suicide attempt motivated by despair. Perhaps it was meant to be another superficial wound like the one in 1829, designed to gain sympathy and attention. But this time, Kaspar had misjudged and stabbed too deeply. Perhaps he hoped that a new attack would revive public interest in his case and lead to a renewed investigation into his origins. Whatever the motive, the official conclusion was that Kaspar Hauser had caused his own death. But many refused to accept this conclusion then, and many refused to accept it now. If Kaspar stabbed himself, why would he walk through the snow to a secluded part of the garden to do it? Why would he invent the story about a mysterious attacker? And most puzzling of all, how could someone deliver a fatal stab wound to himself at such an angle? The human body instinctively protects itself from serious injury. To stab oneself deeply enough to pierce a lung requires overcoming powerful survival instincts. The alternative explanation, murder, carried its own set of problems, but also a dark logic. If Kaspar truly was of noble birth, if he truly was the missing heir to Baden or some other principality, then there were people who had a powerful motive to ensure he never proved his identity. His very existence was a threat. 5 years had passed since his appearance in Nuremberg. The initial sensation had faded. Most people had dismissed him as a fraud. This was the perfect time to eliminate him permanently, when few would care and fewer would investigate deeply. The mysterious note in mirror writing suggested premeditation. Someone had carefully planned this, created a false lead that went nowhere, left evidence that could be interpreted multiple ways. If it was murder, it was executed by someone skilled in deception, someone who understood how to leave just enough doubt that the official investigation would conclude suicide or self-inflicted injury. Kaspar Hauser was buried in Ansbach on December 20th, 1833. His gravestone bore an inscription that would become famous. Here lies Kaspar Hauser, riddle of his time. His birth was unknown, his death mysterious. It was an epitaph that captured the essential truth. No one knew who Kaspar Hauser really was, or what had really happened to him. In the years following his death, Kaspar's story only grew in the public imagination. Books were written arguing both sides, that he was a fraud and that he was a prince. Investigations continued sporadically. In 1876, 43 years after Kaspar's death, a German historian named Friedrich von Gagern published documents suggesting that Kaspar had indeed been the hereditary prince of Baden, kidnapped and replaced with a dying infant. But these documents were disputed by others who claimed they were forgeries or misinterpretations. In 1996, over 160 years after Kaspar's death, modern science finally had the tools to potentially solve the mystery. DNA testing was proposed. Blood samples from Kaspar's clothing, preserved in museums, could be compared to DNA from descendants of the Baden royal family. If there was a match, it would prove the royal connection. If not, it would disprove it. The tests were conducted. The results were ambiguous. The DNA extracted from the bloodstains was degraded, contaminated by time and handling. The testing showed that Kaspar was not related to the maternal line of the Baden family through mitochondrial DNA, which passes from mother to child. But this didn't entirely rule out a Baden connection, as Kaspar could have been related through the paternal line, which mitochondrial DNA doesn't track. The mystery remained unsolved even in the age of modern forensics. So what are we left with? What can we say about Kaspar Hauser with any certainty? We know that on May 26, 1828, a teenage boy appeared in Nuremberg displaying physical and psychological signs consistent with prolonged isolation. We know that he could barely speak, walk, or function in society. We know that his story of imprisonment, whether true or fabricated, was consistent with his physical condition. We know that he learned rapidly once given education and care. We know that he was attacked twice, once surviving and once dying. And we know that his true identity was never definitively established. Was Kaspar Hauser a fraud? A clever young man who created an elaborate story to gain sympathy and support? If so, he was remarkably dedicated to his deception. He maintained his story consistently for 5 years despite intense scrutiny. He displayed physical conditions that would have been nearly impossible to fake: the atrophied muscles, the extreme light sensitivity, the underdeveloped legs. And he died maintaining his story, using his last words to deny that he had harmed himself. Or was he genuine, a victim of a crime so cruel and unusual that many found it impossible to believe? Was he truly imprisoned from infancy in a dark cell, raised in isolation, then released into the world with no explanation? If so, who did this to him and why? Was he nobility, kept hidden to protect someone else's claim to power? Or was he the victim of some other motive we cannot even guess at? The truth is that we will probably never know with certainty. The evidence is too fragmentary, too contaminated by time and controversy. What we do know is that Kaspar Hauser's story touched something deep in the European consciousness of the 19th century. It combined mystery, possible conspiracy, questions about human nature and development, and a tragic arc from hope to despair to death. Kaspar's case influenced philosophy and psychology. Philosophers debated what his story, if true, revealed about the nature versus nurture question. how much of our humanity is inborn, and how much learned. Kaspar seemed to have the capacity for rapid learning and development despite his isolation, suggesting that much of human potential is innate. Yet he also showed severe social and emotional difficulties, suggesting that early development and interaction are crucial. The case also revealed the dark side of 19th century society's fascination with human oddities and exceptional cases. Kaspar was passed from one guardian to another, studied, exhibited, doubted, and ultimately abandoned by most of those who had initially championed him. When he was a novelty, a sensation, people cared for him. When the novelty faded and his story became controversial, he was discarded. Perhaps the most haunting aspect of Kaspar Hauser's story is not the mystery of his origins or his death, but the loneliness that permeated his entire known life. Whether he spent his childhood in a dark cell or not, we know that his years in society were marked by isolation. He was always an outsider, always viewed with suspicion or pity, never fully accepted. He made no lasting friendships. He found no community where he belonged. His diary entries from his final years speak of profound sadness, of feeling trapped, of wishing the burden of his existence would end. In Ansbach today, you can visit Kaspar Hauser's grave. The original gravestone with its famous inscription still stands. Tourists come to see it, to contemplate the mystery. In the Hofgarten, there is a monument marking the spot where Kaspar was attacked. It stands among the trees, a stone reminder of violence and unanswered questions. The city of Nuremberg, where Kaspar first appeared, has preserved the cell in the Westner Gate where he was first held. It has become a small museum dedicated to his case. Visitors can see documents related to his story, can read the letters he carried when he appeared, can see drawings he made during his education. The museum presents the various theories without endorsing any particular one, allowing visitors to draw their own conclusions. Academic interest in Kaspar's case continues. Historians still debate the evidence. In 2002, a German historian named Walter Martin claimed to have found new documentation proving the Baden connection. His claims were disputed by other historians. In 2012, the 200th anniversary of Kaspar's supposed birth, conferences were held discussing his case from historical, psychological, and forensic perspectives. No consensus emerged. What makes Kaspar Hauser's story endure is not just the mystery, but what it represents. It is a story about identity, about belonging, about the cruelty humans can inflict on one another. It is about a young man trying to find his place in a world that never quite accepted him, trying to discover who he was when even he didn't know. It is about the powerful and their secrets, about how far some will go to protect privilege and inheritance. It is also a story about how we construct narratives to make sense of the inexplicable. Faced with Kaspar Hauser's appearance and his bizarre story, society created competing narratives: prince or pauper, victim or fraud, murdered or suicide. These narratives said as much about the people constructing them as they did about Kaspar himself. Those who believed him saw a victim worthy of rescue and justice. Those who doubted him saw a manipulator worthy of contempt. The truth, whatever it was, lay somewhere beneath all these projections and interpretations. Perhaps the most fitting way to understand Kaspar Hauser is to accept that we cannot fully understand him. He remains, as his gravestone says, a riddle. Not all riddles have answers. Some mysteries are meant to haunt us, to remind us of how much we do not and cannot know. Kaspar Hauser is one of those mysteries. He appeared out of darkness, lived briefly in the light, and departed leaving only questions behind. If you visit his grave in Ansbach on a cold December day, when snow covers the ground as it did when he died, you might feel something of what drove so many to become obsessed with his case. There is something profoundly sad about that grave, about the unknown young man buried there. Whether he was a prince or a pauper, whether his story was true or false, Kaspar Hauser suffered. He lived a life marked by isolation, suspicion, and violence. He died young, in pain, without ever knowing who he truly was or why his life had been so strange and difficult. The riddle of Kaspar Hauser remains unsolved. Perhaps it always will. But in trying to solve it, in examining the evidence and debating the theories, we confront larger questions about identity, memory, truth, and justice. We ask ourselves what we would believe in the face of such strangeness. We wonder how we would treat someone who claimed such an impossible past. We think about the children who suffer in darkness, isolated and abused, and we recognize that Kaspar's story, whether entirely true or partly fabricated, points to a real horror that exists in our world. In the end, Kaspar Hauser matters not because we can solve his mystery, but because his story refuses to let us look away. It demands that we consider the possibility that something terrible happened to a child, that powerful forces conspired to hide or destroy a life, that justice was never served. It asks us to hold space for ambiguity and uncertainty, while still feeling compassion for a young man who suffered, whether his suffering began in a dark cell or somewhere else. The boy who stumbled into Nuremberg on May 26, 1828, changed how we think about human development, about cruelty, about the persistence of mystery in an age of reason. Kaspar Hauser's life was short, sad, and strange. His death was violent and unexplained. His legacy is a question that echoes across nearly 2 centuries, demanding an answer we may never be able to give. Who was Kaspar Hauser, and what was done to him? The answer, if it exists, remains hidden in the past, locked away like Kaspar himself in darkness, and perhaps that is fitting. Perhaps some riddles are meant to endure, to remind us that for all our science and investigation, some truths remain beyond our reach, some mysteries resist solution, and some young lives end with only questions as their memorial.